Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any of our platforms. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we discuss a watch that launched in 2004, and it represents one of the great innovations in chronograph design. Really, dating back to the days of Nicholas Riosek, you can't find many landmarks that were more consequential or inventive than the Lange Söhne double split flyback. This watch has the ability to split both seconds and minutes, up to 30 minutes, effectively doubling the utility of the rattrapant system, developed on wristwatch split seconds in the 20th century. Now, the timepiece is extraordinary and awe-inspiring, made from 2004 to 2010 in platinum, as you see here. It is 43.2 millimeters in diameter. It's 15.9 millimeters thick, and from lug tip to lug tip, across the wrist, 51.7 millimeters with a nice broad 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. I've been reviewing double splits on and off for about a decade, and I can tell you that this is a watch for which the sense of awe never wears off. If you want to have that new watch feeling every day with a watch that you own for decades on end, this is one of the few that can provide that feeling. Now, on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see it is pushing the limits. In the past, I've said maybe a 15 centimeter circumference wrist with an oval profile could wear this, and I'm not saying you couldn't, but I do think aesthetically, 16, which is what you have right here, is probably the lower limit. This looks good and it feels incredible, but you can see particularly down the barrel that the lugs are right out to the edge, though not beyond the edge of my wrist. It does have a domed bezel. It'll slide pretty easily under a cuff, surprising in that regard, given that it is almost 16 millimeters thick. Now, getting a little bit closer, you can see Lange spec'd a supercar of a strap here. Calfskin on the bottom, brand new Lange strap. On the top, black, polished, or I should say gloss, large rectangular scale, symmetrical scale, alligator leather. So this large symmetrical scale is always the most expensive cut of gator, and you can see Lange didn't hold back. We have a gray, lightly contrasting stitch. We have Lange's platinum pin buckle, which is smart on two levels. If you've seen my Lange reviews, you already know what I'm going to say. But if you haven't, you need to know this. The Lange buckle is clever. You can see that there is some soft creases and fastening externally. It's Lange branded, and yes, it's made of platinum, but it has an elevated bridge so that the prongs are actually lower than the bridge, so you can see how the strap sits inside the buckle rather than stacking up and adding height under it. We also have this little retaining bar, so if you're like me, small wrist, you're going to use the smallest hole or maybe punch another one. The strap won't get pinned, so to speak, on the pin. That retaining bar means it's easy to remove the strap even when tightly drawn on a small wrist. The case, distinctively Lange. Now, not every Lange has a satinated mid-case. This one does, and I think given the height of the case, that's in good taste. It breaks it up. We have Lange's distinctive stepped lug profile, allegedly the brand's co-refounder, Günter Blümlein, a German watch executive, decided in the early 90s with the resurrection of the brand, they needed something that would make them visually distinct from the Swiss, and part of that was this stepped lug design, which continues. You can see that the pusher adjuster for the split system has both polish and satin, excellent attention to detail. Same goes for the conventional chronograph pushers. Lange branded crown. We have a domed bezel with a couple of different faces. You can see there's a vertical face, a domed face, and then a flange that abuts the sapphire. Now here you can see what I mean by splitting the seconds and the minutes. See how I stopped 1 seconds hand and 1 minute hand? And I will stop the whole mechanism here. I have the ability to read the difference in minutes, which is about 10, and then seconds, which you can read between the seconds hands. And then, of course, I can reactivate, fly back together, see how the minutes hands reconverged, and then I can actually use it as a conventional flyback chronograph using both hands synchronized together. I can reset and restart just by pushing the trigger. So it's a conventional flyback in addition to a double split. Surprisingly, it's also loomed, and decently loomed at that. The large hands at center with plenty of luminescence. You can see that they're probably best described as delta or modified alpha. The indices, the numerals, the hands, they're all white gold to resist oxidation, tarnish, or discoloring over time. And the dial base itself is sterling silver, so it's almost like having a silver dial on the face of your platinum watch, garnished with white gold elements. There is a Rehaut outboard, and the Rehaut has a dial side tachymeter, which is a little bit of a vintage look, as having a dial side tachymeter is really a pre-1960s chronograph look. After 1960, most tachymeters, certainly after the mid-60s, they would be on the bezel as opposed to the dial. Now we have two slightly aging sterling silver recessed registers. They have a concentric pattern internally. You can see that here we're looking at something that's more like the bare silver metallic base, and it turns a little bit champagne over time. You can also see we have a power reserve indicator up and down, and you can see that it moves relatively quickly as you wind, because the watch has a power reserve of 38 hours. Now flipping it all over, 36 to 38 hours is the power reserve. There's a lot going on in here. First of all, platinum case, so very impressive. Also immense depth. There are two column wheels, and the way this works is that you have one column wheel that is the split second column wheel, and one that is the primary. Now here's the split. The way this operates is you can see that there's a set of pincers that arrest the secondary seconds wheel at center. Start everything back up. And you can see it's turning until I use the pincers to stop it with that second column wheel. Now there's also a device called a decoupler, which is used by Lange, Patek, and only the very best split-second chronographs, so that the mechanism isn't dragging, slowing the watch and causing it to lose time overall. When you arrest the split seconds hand, it decouples from the movement. That's important. Now we also have here a balance which is free sprung, with most of the adjustments being done using variable inertia bolts on the balance. It also has a overcoil hairspring, and it is adjusted in 5 positions, which is the high horology and chronometer standard. With the overcoil, it'll keep consistent time in every one of those positions. And of course, you could see it as a stop seconds function right there. All of this pivots on 40 joules, and you could see everything that is sort of a champagne gold is German silver, a nickel copper zinc alloy that's distinctive of pocket watch manufacturing and modern Lange watch manufacturing. Everything that's blue is fired blue steel screws. We also have black polished screws. They serve different purposes. For the most part, the blued screws are used for fixing things in place, and the black polished screws are used for adjustment of the mechanism. We have column wheels, which means the operation is super crisp, and we use lateral clutches because they are traditional and beautiful. You can see everything that turns black as I move this through the light is what's known as black polish, reflecting light only in one direction. Water resistant to 30 meters, you could see that underlying structures like the balance cock are freehand engraved with a burr and no two exactly alike. You can also see well from this angle that both steel chronograph components that are satinated on their tops and German silver bridges, and which are striped on their tops, they have mirrored anglage on their side, and this is exhaustively finished. You can also see that on the chronograph clutch, for example, Lange is not shorting you the interior angles where bevels meet, and in fact is executing it on stainless steel where it's most difficult to apply. Lots and lots to love here. This is the caliber L001.1 movement, one of the landmarks in the entire history of chronograph design. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.